Thank you so much, Professor Crenshaw, for taking this time to chat with me on this banned books sort of crisis that we're seeing play out across our nation. I want to start off kind of just broadly, maybe a little bit of when did you really start to see or realize that these banned books was picking up steam and really becoming an issue?
Well, I anticipated that the effort that President Trump at the time was mounting by issuing an executive order against what he called race and gender stereotyping would, if it was not arrested right then and there, turn into something that was much larger than it was. I think some folks weren't necessarily aware that he had issued this executive order. And just to take folks back, this was right after, I think it was the last debate with then Democratic nominee Biden. And Trump was asked to repudiate the Proud Boys. And instead of repudiating them, he said, stand by. And I thought, stand by for what? Right? What is he gonna do? So when he came out in probably about a month later with an executive order banning ideas that have basically traveled under the banner of equal opportunity, ideas having to do with structural racism and intersectionality and implicit bias, and he rolled all that together with this notion that these ideas are reverse discrimination. I realized we were in trouble because this was a far right wing nationalist, white nationalist kind of idea that diversity means, hunt down the last white person. Equal opportunity or inclusion means anti-white. These were ideas that circulated among the Proud Boy neo-nationalist kind of set. And now they were coming into the center of American government. That was a milestone. So my concern was, all right, we have to treat this as the threat it really is. It's a threat to equal opportunity practice. It's a threat to ideas that animate the notion that we still have work to do in this society. And if we don't meet it with clarity and commitment, it's not going to go away. And honestly, I think a lot of people saw it simply as a campaign tactic. It was a campaign tactic, that's true. But that didn't mean it wasn't going to be dangerous and it wasn't going to last. And so, of course, President Biden rescinded the order, but it was too late by that time. What didn't happen at the federal level then happened in red states across the country. And it was only a matter of time between the moment that a certain set of ideas has been deemed to be illegitimate, anti-American, anti-everything, and books that were thought to embrace those ideas would be banned. The two things went hand in hand. And I think folks just didn't anticipate that it would grow that quickly, that broadly, and would have quite the devastating effect on the freedom to learn that it has.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you touched on is that there's tons of books being banned, and but I think we are seeing a clear pattern of which books those are. They're oftentimes written by Black writers, especially by women, especially by LGBTQ authors. When we look at this pattern, is this all political, or does it feel like there's something more sinister, for lack of a better word, that's taking place when it's these voices, really, because that's what the books are. It's somebody's voice that is being pulled from access to students.
Well, I would say that it is sinister politics. So it's both of those things. But I would also say that this is historically familiar. This is rehearsing a pattern and practice that we saw play out at the end of Reconstruction, for example. One of the oldest tactics to support an inequitable social order is to suppress and silence those who are in the position to call out that social order and to anchor ideas that are useful to see it more clearly in order to transform it. So, one of the oldest dimensions of the interruption of the free flow of ideas in the United States has been and was the effort to wipe out abolitionist advocacy. The southern states actually used law, federal law, as well as state law, to ban tracts that advocated for the end of enslavement. They used violence to kill people who were willing to say that slavery should not be a feature of a republic that was built on freedom and liberty. These ideas were viewed as incompatible with the status quo, and therefore that incompatibility was enough to suppress it. And let's not also forget that people of African descent were precluded in many courts of law from testifying. Well, what were they testifying to? They were telling the story of what it meant to live lives as racialized people that were framed as people who had no rights that white men were bound to respect. So these ideas that there's certain groups of people, certain voices, certain stories that cannot be told, and that they are legitimate targets of censure is as old as the Republic. What should be concerning to people is, how is it that things that we thought were in the rear view mirror are now ahead of us? How are we coming back into the same territory out of which we thought we had come? And why isn't there a greater sense of alarm about the fact that more books are being banned now than in recent history? Why aren't we more alarmed that there are efforts to take away the capacity of future generations to learn from whence we came? That, I think, is the harder political question. We get where the MAGA sensibility is coming from, right? To basically say, we want the country to be great again. You have to erase those who are saying there were a lot of things in the past that were not great. But the bigger question is, what about everyone else who's not part of that cabal? Why has it been so easy to do this? Where are the clarion calls? Where is the effort to gather together all of our resources to say censorship is not only un-American, it is not conducive to protecting the democracy that we claim we want to have?
Speaking with Tiffany Jackson on specifically her book, Monday's Not Coming, and I saw how emotional she was to know that her book was being banned. And for something that she says was a very tiny part that was taken out of context. It was about sort of the issue of consent. Really, it wasn't delving into anything graphic in reality. And then, of course, we see with George Johnson with All Boys Aren't Blue, which is his memoir.
Yes.
And his is being banned for being explicit, and I think some words have been used to describe it as pornography. And their response has been that, well, it's a memoir, and we're highlighting for this specific age group who is probably beginning to explore their sexuality, how to do that, or perhaps how to do it safely, things like this. So I'm curious, in your perspective, with some of and many of the books that we are seeing being banned, if you have had a chance to read through some of them, or some of them, if there's actually anything in there that is inappropriate, I guess, or that is dangerous, as we hear some parents and lawmakers advocate against, that you have managed to see or read about in these banned pieces?
Not at all. Cheyanne, I have to raise one issue. You were breaking up a little bit, so I don't know if it's on my end or your end, after all of this with the internet, and I don't want to interrupt. So I could go and get a Wi-Fi thing to make sure if you want to use the recording.
You are coming across
Visual.
perfectly for me. So
Okay.
must be
So so let's pick up with what you were saying. I think the reality is that these books contain information that challenge the narratives that people want to hold on to about the world they live in, about the histories that they have inherited, and about possible futures that may look different from the past that they are wedded to. So, yes, there are ideas that suggest that reinforcing the idea that sexuality is limited, gender is, binary, that we live in a society in which people get what they deserve. All of these ideas are disrupting of assumptions that many people were born and raised with. But look, that's what education is all about: challenging assumptions, providing more information, preparing people for futures that are much more complicated than people think they are. So the idea that everything you read should make you feel very comfortable, take you 1 inch, outside of your comfort zone, and that's enough. That is a prescription for an ignorant populace that cannot integrate new information and therefore believes that the past is the best place to be. So I think that it's important for people to understand that there are concrete agendas that are being advanced by efforts to limit what young people have access to. And let's also be clear, this is no longer about K through 12 education. This is no longer about even higher education. This is about what the entire country will have access to, what kinds of thoughts are permitted. This is going to the core of whether there is freedom to think in this country. And unless people understand that that's what it's about, it's not about a paragraph here or a description there. It's about a wholesale effort to say there are legitimate thoughts and storylines and illegitimate thoughts and storylines, and we're going to use political power to determine what those things are. That is not characteristic of a democracy. It's characteristic of a very different kind of society that we claim we do not want to be. Well, if that's what we really do not want to be, we've got to start seeing this threat for what it is, interrupting it where it's happening, and creating active rights for broader access to more information rather than conceding to less.
I know you've spoken on this previously, but some of your own work has come under attack as well about whether or not we should be teaching your own work in schools, or whether students should have access to the books and articles that you have written. And like I said, obviously speaking with Tiffany, it was very different. It was an emotional a moment for her. I'm curious for you, having not that your work being challenged is any less obnoxious or unacceptable, but if you have a different way of looking at what it means today in this political climate. I know some authors will say, well, it's an honor to have my work challenged, or to say it's banned because I'm up there with names like Toni Morrison, right? What does it mean for you, as we're watching this play out, to have your own work coming into question or saying we shouldn't teach it to students?
Well, I'm not going to say that it isn't profoundly disturbing to see your work being banned, not just by MAGA conservatives and right wingers, but by institutions and friends who are willing to negotiate away the principle of Black studies as being, for example, a study not just of Black facts, but of the sociology and the history that make those facts relevant. Or to see those who are willing to say intersectionality has been made controversial. So because it's been made controversial, we shouldn't teach it. It gives the loudest, the most crass, the most dishonest faction of our population veto power. They couldn't do it completely without the concession of too many people who should know better and who have really surprised me. So when I think about seeing, for example, I don't know, Arkansas recently taking Black studies out of the curriculum and pointing to the fact that a concept is there that says the intersections of identity, being Black and female or Latinx or queer, that this has to be taken out because, not because it's not true, not because it's been shown to be an inaccurate framing, but because it's associated with critical race theory, and critical race theory is associated with one person's name, right? My name is there. That to me is McCarthyism of the 21st century. So yes, it is, on one hand, it says a lot when you look at the list of people who have been taken out of the curriculum. Bell Hooks, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Audre Lorde. These are giants. It is amazing that their incredible contributions could so easily be erased with the consent of people who study them. That's shocking. And it is disturbing. And at the same time, I think it should make clear to people that this isn't about one set of ideas, and it isn't about anything that's anti-American. It's about repressing knowledge. People don't come after you for things that are valueless. I've said this about things like the vote. If they're trying to keep us from voting, it's because there's power in our vote. If they're trying to say these are authors that you shouldn't read, then it's because there's knowledge there that's useful in helping us understand this moment in order to better navigate it. So I like to take an adaptation of Michelle Obama's when she says, when they go low, we go high. I like to say, when they say don't read it, I say, give me everything that they want. In fact, I say, we'll give it to you. Our organization gives away these books that have been banned because we know that if they don't want us to read it, they realize that there's power between those pages, and we cannot let them successfully take away the value that we've created over the generations that we've been here.
Yeah, and you did a sort of bus tour, a banned books bus tour. I think it was last year, right?
Yes.
Do you mind sharing sort of where some of the places that you went, but also what you were hearing from folks who showed up for this?
Well, we started out at George Floyd Square, started out right there. In so many ways, the George Floyd murder was the beginning of both the most, the widest, most heavily populated protest movement that the country has had. There were protests in all 50 states. We can't understand these book bans. We can't understand the effort to erase knowledge, especially Black knowledge, without realizing that this is retrenchment. This is in response to the George Floyd, Breonna Taylor activation. So we started right there. And then we moved through Kenosha, and we know what happened in Kenosha. We moved to Chicago and Detroit and Pennsylvania, down to DC, to Virginia, to North Carolina, and ended up in Jacksonville. Our goal was, number one, to motivate people to come out and exercise their power. Um, all across the country, efforts to make it more difficult for Black folks, other people of color, poor folks to vote. It's just rehearsing what happened in the 19th century. We want to disenfranchise you because we can't control you as long as you're able to vote. So that was the primary message. And we wanted people to understand that some of these places that are trying to keep us from voting are the same place that are trying to keep us from reading, trying to keep us from knowing, understanding. It's one thing to vote. It's another thing to be literate about our situation in order to know when and how to vote. So we were going place to place to place, giving parents books like Something Happened in Our Town, a banned book that talks about what happened when a Black person was shot by police, or Born on the Water. This is Nicole Hannah-Jones's book that takes up the question, how do I, as a Black child, answer the question, from whence do I come? And of course, Critical Race Theory and Between the World and Me. We passed out 18, 19 books for free. And our goal was simply to make it concrete for people. They know that there's something called censorship. They know that there is an attack on 1619. They know there's an attack on critical race theory, but they don't know exactly, well, why are these books? Why are these ideas contraband? So we said, look, let's give it to you. The best evidence on our side is for you to actually read the book. Then you'll understand why it is that there are efforts afoot, highly funded and coordinated, to take this knowledge away. So we were delighted when people would come and they would point to the most controversial books. Like, we couldn't keep critical race theory or 1619 on the tables. People wanted it. You know, the idea that if they're going to tell us we don't want it, we want to see. It was amazing. And it was great to see children come and pick up Something Happened in Our Town and start to read it to each other, or Ruby Bridges' book, which was also banned in many places. So knowing that people can be activated when they actually see what it's all about, that was the most exhilarating part of the unbanned book tour.
Yeah, and I guess that's my last question for you is about the students, right? Because I think of it's the students who are finding the fallout of this right now, right? So, and it's students, as you mentioned, it's not just K through 12. This is, we've seen some of it, there's efforts even with colleges to say, oh no, you shouldn't teach that in this college, or we're going to take away your funding if you're going to teach this into your curriculum or incorporate DEI programs into your curriculum. What do you feel right now is not only the impact on students, but as you just mentioned, some of these students wanted these books anyway. They said, well, I want to see it. So what do you think in this moment that from the conversations that you have, the students are feeling, but that how they're responding as well, I guess?
Yeah. Well, you know, from the little bit of evidence that I have in going on this 17-stop tour, when you try to take things away from young people, you know, it has the opposite effect. It did with me when, you know, when there were things I wasn't supposed to see. It made me all the more interested in trying to see it. So in some ways, the attack on all of our work has brought our work to the attention of masses of students who've never heard of it. I mean, look, in my own work, intersectionality, critical race theory, it's been around for, 30 years. New generations are being introduced to it thanks to, Fox TV and various other foundations that have decided that this work is contraband. So there are ways in which they have opened the proposition that young people are actually more attracted to these ideas. I would say my two thoughts of caution are these. Number one, this effort to suppress books and ideas goes hand in hand with efforts to attack teachers, destroy unions, and undermine public education. And there's no doubt about it. This is not us saying this. This is the cabal that's behind it. They've been very clear that they want to sow dissension and dissatisfaction with public education. They want to break teachers' unions. And they want to defund this public institution by making people believe that what's happening in these institutions is nothing other than indoctrination. And the way in which they are accomplishing it is not necessarily by prosecuting teachers, although they are trying to do so, but by the chilling effect. This stuff is so unclear. What is it about intersectionality, for example, that is illegitimate or that is beyond debate? Nobody knows what it is, and they can't say what it is because they don't have to. All they need to do is say, you should be very afraid, very, very afraid. And teachers will back away. Most people are not willing to be martyrs for causes that they either don't fully understand or they fully understand, but they got to put food on the table. So all they need to do is raise a controversy around Black studies, around certain authors, around certain ideas, and the vast majority of people will think twice before they wade into that territory. That is the danger that we're looking at now. And we have to think this isn't being played for just 2024. This is a game that's being played for the rest of the century. And we know that the last time something like this happened, or the first time it happened during Reconstruction, the suppression lasted for 6-7 decades. So we need to think that we're fighting not just for our children, but our children's children and their grandchildren. That is what is at stake. That's why we have to look at this, not just about, this next election. We have to look at it in terms of the future of the country.
And I did lie to you, but as you were talking, I had one more question I wanted to ask, and my Zoom is yelling at me that I have 6 minutes. So I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I'll make it fast.
But I want to ask you, with all of that in mind, what or how do you want to continue to encourage writers, whether they're Black, they're brown, they're queer, to say, you don't, just because this is happening, don't stop trying to tell, whether it's a memoir like that you have written, or it's partially a memoir, it's fiction, but it's from experiences. What would you want to, how would you want to encourage them?
And let me add to that, the storytellers in Hollywood, the storytellers who are telling stories that more people will see than will ever read anything I write, right? And the reality is that the march for freedom and the blood that has been shed was shed over what story of who we are we willing to embrace? Martin Luther King didn't give up his life to be edited into, just this figure that doesn't tell the truth about this country as part of the imperative for transforming it. All of us carry that responsibility. All of us who have benefited from the courage of all too many people who put it all on the line, and some who did not walk away with their lives. They did so because they knew that the only way we were going to be able to make this country and make the human condition all that it can and should be is by refusing to back down, refusing to be silenced. We didn't come this far to let a handful of people, they're not even the majority, tell us that we cannot speak our truth and tell our stories. So this is, the same kind of politic that happened before. Those who insisted on telling the truth were either suppressed, killed, their tongues were cut off. We can't be that generation that refused to take the baton and the risk of the baton and play it forward. So, I'm writing my memoir now. I know as I'm saying some of these things, some of the people are going to say, aha, this is what cannot be said. And I've got to count on masses of others saying, not only can it be said, it must be said.
Professor, thank you so much for taking this time to share your thoughts.
It's certainly been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Take care.
You too.